All right, so let's do a quick two example problems before we start. So we're going to review the information from last time just using the periodic table. So number one is asking what's the name of the element Ga. Super simple. Just go to the periodic table, look for Ga, and the name for Ga is gallium. Okay, so for number one for today, just make sure that you wrote gallium. Okay. Any questions on that one? Hopefully these aren't too bad. All right, the second one, we're looking for platinum on the periodic table. And if you look for platinum, it is right here, number 78. Okay, so the symbol for platinum is going to be capital P, lowercase t. Okay, so that's just a review from the previous class period where we learned about finding names and the symbols on the periodic table. Again, just make sure that you keep in mind the capital and the lowercase letters because they do matter when you're talking about the element symbol. Okay. All right, any questions? Hopefully not too bad. All right, so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning more about the periodic table. We're going to be learning one more aspect of it, and this is the last one for a bit. But I want you guys on your lecture notes, I want you guys to write down the title of the lecture. It's going to be right here, atomic structure. Okay, so on your paper, I want you guys to write down atomic structure. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about what an atom looks like, okay? All right, so just make sure you're copying down the title of the lecture, maybe on the top of your paper or something. Atomic structure. All right, so there's going to be a good amount of drawing today for the notes and for the assignment because we're going to be drawing what the atoms look like. Okay, so let's draw a general structure of the atom. Now, you guys do not need to copy this down right here. I'm going to talk about this in a second. But an atom is very simple. There's three different components to an atom, and I do want you guys to write this down. Okay, the first component is called a proton. Okay, and I want you guys to put a plus sign next to the proton. Because the proton has something called a positive charge. Okay, you could think of it like a battery or a magnet. You know how there's a positive side and a negative side. They're opposites of one another. Same thing for an atom. An atom is made out of a positive proton. Okay. And the negative component of an atom is called an electron. Okay, so those are two of the three components of an atom. The positive proton and the negative electron. Okay, so let's go over the last component before we draw a picture of a general atom. The last component is called a neutron. And this is something that has no charge. So you can just draw a circle with nothing inside of it. So you got a positive proton, a negative electron, and a neutron, which has no charge or is neutral. Okay. And these three components exist in an atom. So let's talk about where they're located. So let's start with the protons. The protons are in the very middle of the atom. So on your paper, maybe next to what you wrote, leave some space around it, but let's draw maybe one or two protons, okay? And the protons are stuck to one another, okay? And they're gonna be in the middle, so they're connected. So that's the proton. Protons in the middle of the atom. Let's go to the neutrons. The neutrons are also in the middle of the atom. They're also connected to the proton. So let's draw maybe like two neutrons. Again, you can draw circles with nothing inside of them. Okay, and these guys are in the middle of the atom. Okay, and the middle of the atom, this part right here, this is called the nucleus of the atom. You guys might have heard that term in biology, right? That's where the middle of the cell is. That's where all the DNA is. Well, we got a nucleus in chemistry as well, and that's about the middle of the atom. Okay. Okay, so you got the protons and the neutrons inside of the nucleus. All right, and then the last component are the electrons. Now, the electrons, they fly around the nucleus. Just make sure that they're not touching the nucleus, and that's pretty much what the general picture of an atom looks like. So you got the protons and the neutrons, they're connected together in the middle. God bless you. And then the electrons, they're not connected to the nucleus or each other. They just fly around. And that's pretty much what every single atom looks like. You got the protons, neutrons in the middle, and then the electrons fly around the nucleus. I don't. Yeah. All right, any questions on a general structure? We'll come back to this. I'll show you guys how to do practice problems with this in a second. Okay. But I do want you to copy down this part right here. This is what we're going to be focusing on today. Okay. The number of protons that an atom has tells you what element it is. Okay, so if you can't see it, I'll write it up here. The number of protons, okay, that's going to tell you what element the atom is. Okay, so last time we talked about the periodic table of elements, how there are different types of elements, right? Different types of atoms. Well, the thing that determines what element something is how many protons it has. Okay. So all the atoms with one proton, they're the same element. All the atoms with two protons, they are the same element. Everything that has three protons, they are the same element, and so on and so forth. Okay. All right, so let's talk about, excuse me, how to find out how many protons an element has. So I'm gonna scroll down a little bit. And you guys, again, we copied this down, so you don't need to copy it. But let me show you guys on the periodic table. So I want you guys to look at your periodic table, again, the one that we've been taking notes on. Finding the protons is really easy. It's just this number right here on the top. So if you guys want to jot this down somewhere on your paper or on your periodic table, the number on the top of the box, this is called the atomic number. Okay? And the atomic number tells you how many protons that element has. So hydrogen has 1 proton, lithium has 3, beryllium has 4, and so on and so forth. Okay, so jot this down on your periodic table. Okay, the number on top of the box is called the atomic number, but it tells you how many protons that element has. All right, so with that, let's see if you guys can try numbers 3 and 4 to get on your own. Okay, you can work with the person next to you, but I want you guys to just use the periodic table. I want you guys to write down which element has 12 protons and how many protons does bromine have. Okay, so I'll give you guys about 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes to try that out with the person next to you. You can check your answer, and then we'll go over it in about 2-3 minutes. Okay, which element has 12 protons and how many protons does bromine have? Just write this down in your notes. All right, so for number 3, we're looking for the element that has 12 protons. So we just go to the periodic table, and all we have to do is look for the element that has the number 12 on the top. Okay, so if you guys look for the element with number 12, it's going to be magnesium. Okay, so for number 3, your answer for that is going to be Mg. If you wrote the full name, that's totally fine, but like I told you guys, you can always just write the symbol to substitute the name, and we'll be good. Okay, so Mg. And that's because it has a 12 on the top. All right, let's go to number 4. How many protons does bromine have? So for bromine, we just look for bromine on the periodic table. So bromine is all the way on the right side. Okay, and it's going to be Br. Bromine has a 35 on the top, which means bromine has 35 protons. That's it. That's how simple the proton stuff is. 35, and then I sometimes shorthand protons like this, so if you want to do that as well, you can just P and then a plus next to it. Okay, so number 3 is Mg, 12 protons, and bromine has 35 protons. Any questions about that? Hopefully that's not too bad. All right, so let's go to number 5, and I'm gonna go over this with you guys because this is kind of a trick question. But like I said, the protons tell you what element it is, right? But like we learned before, there are different things inside the element, right? There's neutrons and there's electrons. Okay, so let's take a look at number 5. The question is asking which element has 5 protons and 4 neutrons. Okay, so this one's a little bit different because it's not just asking about the protons, it's asking about the neutrons. Well, we just talked about how the protons tell you what the element is. Okay, and so the key that I want you guys to jot down is on your notes is this right here. Okay, an element can have the same number of protons, but can have a different number of neutrons. So jot that down somewhere. You can have the same number of protons and be the same element, but you can have a different number of neutrons. Okay, so an element has to have the same protons, but it can have different neutrons. All right, so let's talk about what that means. So it's asking what element has 5 protons and 4 neutrons, right? So again, the protons are the only thing that matters when you're talking about the element. So if we look on the periodic table, if we look for the one that has 5, it's going to be boron. Okay, so your answer to number 5 is going to be boron. Okay, and here it's saying it has 5 protons and 4 neutrons. Okay, the neutrons do not matter when it comes to the identity of the element. It could have 4 neutrons, it could have 100 neutrons, it could have 0 neutrons. It'll still be boron if you have 5 protons. Okay, let's say another example. Let's say that you have an element that has 5 protons and 6 neutrons. Okay, this element is still going to be boron. And the reason why is, again, 5 protons. The protons tell you what element it is. It doesn't matter how many neutrons there are. The neutron number can be different, but as long as it has 5 protons, it's going to be the same element. Okay? So I did want to clarify that because this does kind of trip people up a little bit when they start learning about this. Just keep that in mind. Any questions about that? All right, before we do the last type of questions for this class, I do want you guys to write down one thing. Okay, and this is for today. Okay, today we are only going to be talking about something called neutral atoms, and you're going to look up what that means on for your assignment. Okay, but just for today, always assume that an atom has the same number of protons as it does electrons. Okay, so if something has 5 protons, you're going to assume it has 5 electrons. Something has 100 protons, you're going to assume it has 100 electrons. Okay, so just jot that down somewhere so you remember. This will be helpful for your assignment. Okay, today we're only going to be talking about something called neutral atoms, and that's when you have the same number of protons as you do electrons. Okay. Just make sure you have that written down somewhere. I would put a star next to it or something because a couple of your assignments or assignment problems today, it's going to require you to remember this. All right, so we're going to do the last type of problem for today, and then we'll be all done. This is where we start drawing the picture of the atoms. All right, so let's go on to this. And again, I'm recording this. If you miss any part of this, you guys can check back on Canvas. Don't feel super rushed for any of this. Yeah, go ahead. All right, so we're going to do one last problem. It's going to be number 6. Okay, and so what we're going to do for this problem right here is we're going to draw a picture of a helium atom with 4 neutrons. So on your paper, I want you guys to write number 6. And we're just going to label that we're talking about a helium atom. And helium is He. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is, for this type of problem, we want to figure out how many protons, neutrons, and electrons this atom is going to have. So let's start with the neutrons because they already give it to you, right? So it tells us that there are 4 neutrons. So underneath He, let's just write that it has 4 neutrons. All right, so what we need to figure out now is we need to figure out how many protons and how many electrons it has. So I want you guys to take a minute. You can work with the person next to you. I want you guys to just write down on your paper how many protons and how many electrons does this atom have. Just check with them, make sure you guys both get the same answer, and then we'll go over it in 1 minute before we draw the picture. Ah, bless you. Maybe 30 more seconds to write it down on your paper. How many protons and how many electrons does helium have? Alrighty, guys. So let's check the periodic table. If you look for helium, which is He, it's right here on the very top, right? And if you take a look at helium, the number on top of the box is 2. Okay, so that means that helium has 2 protons. So if you guys got that, great job. All right, now we got to figure out the electrons. Well, we just said that for today, we're talking about neutral atoms, which means you have the same number of protons as you do electrons. Okay, this is going to change later, but at least for today, protons and electrons are always the same. So you have 2 protons, that means you have 2 electrons. Okay. All right, so now that we have the numbers for protons, neutrons, and electrons, we can draw the picture of the atom. Okay. Okay, so let's draw our picture. Okay, let's start by drawing the neutrons. Well, we said earlier the neutrons are in the middle of the atom, right? So you're gonna leave some space around it, but in the middle of the atom, we're gonna draw 4 neutrons. Okay, and they're all touching each other. They're all connected, and that's gonna be our picture for the neutrons. Okay. Let's move on to the protons. There's 2 protons. So they're also in the middle and they're connected to the neutrons. So we're going to draw 2 circles with a positive sign in the middle. And they're also going to be in the middle and they're going to be touching. So these are all connected. And that's going to be our 2 protons. Okay, and if you oriented the circles differently, like if it's not sideways, like if it's long ways, that's totally fine. If you made a circle, that's totally fine, as long as they're all connected together in the middle. All right, and then lastly, we have the 2 electrons, and we said the electrons, they fly around the nucleus and they're not touching anything. Okay, they don't even touch each other. They're separate from one another. And so just make sure that you have 2 electrons flying around. And there you go. That's generally what an atom is going to look like. You got the protons and the neutrons in the middle. They're all connected. And then the electrons are the ones that are flying around and they're not connected to anybody. They're just by themselves. They fly around.